Talking about accusations, there is an accusation about the hula baloo that was on Monday, that decongestion program by the county government of Nairobi. But it was such a congestion, you wouldn't like it. People had to walk for many minutes. The traffic jam for many hours. However, Sonko says it was a drill. Wait for more. Hear what he had to say.
Tuache kufanya siasa na hii maneno. Mimi naona drills zinafanywa hata airports kujiprepare against disasters, kwa malls. Kwa hivyo hata Nairobi nilikuwa kidogo nataka kujaribu tuone kama na bado tunajipanga. Wacha kwa sasa tukue unpopular, but we make the right decisions. And to make right decision at times is very painful. Mukipika mayai kwa nyumba ama omelette, lazima uvunje mayai. Kwa hivyo hii kelele ya chura haitustui. Kutembea ni exercise na bado mtatembea tena. Hata huko Rwanda Kagame anafanyisha watu exercise. Tutachunga tu maslahi ya wale wa mama wako na mimba, physically challenged people, wa mama wazee, lakini vijana mutembee. It is just 1 kilometer walk from railways or from Mudhurwa to CBD. Mkuwe active. Na mimi kama governor yenu sitakubali laziness. Mtatembea na mtatembea tena.
Talking about breaking eggs and making omelets. There's one egg that probably we need to break. That Nairobi city is such an important city that it cannot be managed by trial and error method. I think it's a serious egg.
It is a serious egg. I'm sorry I have to say this. When I listen to our Honorable Governor speaking, it makes me sad to some extent, considering the story that aired in the bulletin by Asha Mwilu about the effect of what happened on Monday, a father losing his child because he was stuck in traffic for so long. And that's just one. There are so many instances. There's an old man who was in one of our stories who had to drop off at Nyayo Stadium, and he goes to Nairobi Hospital for physiotherapy, and he had to walk all day because he needs the treatment. So that in itself is very serious, and I don't think the governor should have made fun of that, because it's really hits close to home to a lot of people. But my worry about this is that the situation in Nairobi is expected to get worse, because here I go again with numbers, because of population. We expect the population of Nairobi by the year 2030 to be about 10 million people. It will reach a point where you cannot even step out of your house, where you'll find congestion. But I think in developed societies, we don't get the public service vehicles out of the cities. We get the private vehicles out of the city. Look at it this way: a private vehicle will carry 1 person, but a PSV will carry 14. Why don't we think about solutions instead of, why is it always in this country that implementing policy is an event? Joe,
recently you were in the city, in New York City, and such places.
Oh, I had even forgotten. But
the reminder.
Very few people drive into the city and park there. Actually, most people use trains and buses and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, eventually, there is need for such a mass transport system, an effective one, that you will be encouraged to leave your vehicle at home, wait for a bus, come to work, and you know, even after news gang, you can comfortably go back home.
I think that what we saw there is what they would call a perfect cop-out from the governor. Quite frankly, because what happened, you cannot say it was a drill. A drill for what? Because usually a drill is supposed to prepare us for something. It's not the duty of the government, county government, to make us walk. We should decide if we want to walk. Because if you wanted us to walk, there would be, you know, like walking lanes and cycling and all of those things. But the larger point I wanted to make about this is this: that whatever you do, there will always be congestion in that city for as long as you're not providing viable alternatives. They tried to increase the parking fees. Has that reduced the number of private cars that we see there? Why? Because if I am going to be driving from Rongai, I can stay in that traffic and eventually I will get to town. The alternative would be I get into Matatu, for example, and then those gentlemen, if they can be called that, will get to Bomas, for example, and then they realize, oh, there are other people there, and you know, this looks really nice. Then they will drop me there, and then they take those people back to Rongai because there are many people there. The other thing that will happen is that I'm coming to work in the morning. Most people would want to have peace of mind when they're coming to the office. So you want to sit comfortably there, maybe read the newspaper or whatever it is, meditate, whatever people do to start their day. But if that is not going to happen because there's noise, other people are doing all manner of things, and you don't have a choice about it, you will drive that car even if you're going to pay 500 shillings every day to park it there. So in my view, the first thing that we need to do is, how do we make sure we move as many people as possible, as comfortably as possible to Nairobi in a reliable way? Because out there, as you ask, they will say that this train will leave at 7:01, and it will leave exactly at 7:01. Yeah. So I can say I'm going to meet Gashuri at 10 o'clock, and I can work out my schedule, and I know at 10 o'clock, 5 minutes to 10, yes, I will be there and I will meet Gashuri. That is not happening. So why are you asking me to leave my car? And even the matatus that now people use, they leave them out there. We have it totally upside down in my view.
Yvonne and Lina, while Kenyans were moody about Awori's appointment, wow, they were also moody about the distance of the termini. I mean, yes, you're telling somebody who is coming from Jogoo Road to alight at Mudhurwa, 2.9 kilometers, yes, and walk to Ngara if they're going to Parklands or Westlands or something like that. And also, the traffic that day was created largely because these vehicles could not turn effectively. So, I mean, something needed to have been done about the size of those termini and the thinking behind how guys were going to alight and board.
Right. Francis, you make a very valid point, and earlier you drew comparisons between Nairobi and New York. And you know what that does is to, in the same breath, suggest that Governor Andrew Cuomo is then Mike Sonko's counterpart. We must actually, as a country, also start assessing the quality of thought that goes into some of these serious issues that we face. This is the second time the city was coming down to a shutdown. You remember the Matatu strike the other day, and it crashed. And the truth is, who is owning this space? Nobody is. We had the minister for the cabinet secretary for transport the other day in the studio, and honestly, in my view, it didn't sound like he's owning anything. He is pushing the ball upstairs. Look at Mike Sonko. He's tested his 36 hours of a very, very infamous, and now what he calls a drill. So the quality of thought that is attending to these serious issues is wanting. We cannot do some of these measures when the infrastructure doesn't exist. So people are light and then there are no buses. Because that day what we would have expected to see is, Mike Sonko, the governor of Nairobi, will stop vehicles in Ngara because there are these buses that will then ferry them from here to the CBD. There are no such options. CS for transport, at the height of the strike, suggests, the Kenya Railways should increase the number of services. How do you increase the number of services without increasing the length of the track? Right. Which tracks do they use? Yeah. You can't drive a train on the road. You can't increase services on single lane tracks. So there's a lot that we aspire without fitting the basics.
Francis, for just a moment before you continue, something Lina said that triggered a comment that I have to make, talking about that fitting. Statistics, again, sorry, I come up with them all the time. We have 20,000 matatus plying the different routes in Nairobi. And apparently the spaces that are available in the various termini are about 550. And the argument is that these termini are not for vehicles to be parked, just for dropping and picking. So between, I think, 10 and 40 minutes. But still, it doesn't make any sense. 20,000 matatus. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Thika Road and Wayakiwe, they have over 3,000 matatus that ply that route. In Mombasa and Langata Road, more than 8,000 matatus ply that route. And Ngong Road have 1,000 matatus plying that route. That's just looking at the sheer number of vehicles that would have to squeeze into that space of 550 parking space for them. So ridiculous. Sorry.
Yvonne, ultimately, I've had many people say the idea is noble. The idea is good to decongest the city. I mean, a lot of time, man hours, a lot of money is lost in these traffic snarl-ups. But probably what was wrong is the how. The what was okay, the how was the problem.
But here's the thing, though, and you talk about man hours that are spent. A public transport system is essentially to help most especially low-income earners, who, it has been shown, spend over 30% of their income on transport, who spend 2 to 4 hours commuting each day. So when you are doing a mass transport system, a mass transit system, you must be doing it for those who are the low-income earners. This is not about the people that have cars. And the interesting thing about it is when you are talking about the how, it's relatively simple. We're all very excited with, you know, a light rail train, like what's we see in Addis and perhaps even the underground train in New York. But for a lot of developing nations, the bus rapid transit system has been proven to be the most affordable and can be sorted out. In fact, the infrastructure for it already exists. I mean, we've just done the red lines, but it's very simple to do. It'll take you about 18 months. A light rail train will take you 3 to 4 years. Obviously, it'll cost you less money to be able to put in place a bus rapid transport system. So that means even politically, this would be good for someone's dividends. The governor can easily do this in, what, a year and a half, and therefore by the time his term...
I think the question also, if I just jump in, the question is, whose business is it to make this happen? Because this is public transport, which means that the moment, I mean, I saw there's a hue and cry about the possibility of matatus being phased out, and there was that story that the late Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, at a certain point, Matatu people went and said, oh, you know, now we have all these problems and whatever, and then the bus people are complaining. So he said, if you sold your bus, how many matatus would you buy? He said about 3. Then he said, sell your buses, get your matatus. I think right now the reverse should happen. The president, he is actually related to the first one. So he could actually say now, why don't we reverse that logic and say, if you have your matatus, why don't you sell them and do a bigger bus? And then those buses are tightly regulated. And because at the end of the day, the same way we have regulated the price of fuel, for example, to some mixed results, but I think that the transport system needs to be, public transport needs to be regulated, because it is a strategic sector for the growth of the economy. People can't move. If people cannot move, it means that the economy is at a standstill. If you talk about those developed cities and whatever, those systems are managed very efficiently, but the oversight, like New York that you talked about, there is what they call the Port Authority of New Jersey and New York that manages all manner of transportation system between those two states. But those things, whereas there's a sort of commercial dimension to it, but there is serious oversight from the public sector, from the authorities, to make sure that people can move from point A to B, especially
of solutions,
people who don't have alternatives.
But just at the back of Joe's point, go to a tweet here. Very interesting from Omonyo M. Nairobi's problem began when all government services were centralized in the political and commercial capital. So everyone ran to Nairobi because all the good opportunities existed there. To decongest Nairobi, begin by depopulating it, literally.
Here's a point, separate the commercial and the administrative capital.
But I wanted to add this, just on the back of that. Not only should a public transport system be run by government, and not only should it be regulated, but it should be highly subsidized, so that you're able to pay 20 shillings to come into town, or 50 shillings, as the case may be. Right now, it's in the hands of private persons who can change the route at will, who can hike the fares. As people in Rongai know all too well, the slight sign of a drizzle becomes fare is about 500 shillings. But listen to this. There's also the issue of public participation, which came up on Monday. Many people saying, listen, we were not consulted. And it is a very fundamental principle in our constitution. You cannot make laws and regulations without public participation. We're taking a look at what happens in other countries. In Sao Paulo, they have one of the best. In fact, they were given an award by the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy as being the best worldwide in 2014. How did they come up with those laws? It was public participation on steroids. They had 114 public hearings. 25,000 people participated, gave their ideas. There was a website with a draft and everything. This is a function that was wholly owned by the people. So they decided what was good for them, what wouldn't work, because, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the governor and the people around him may be good but they don't know everything.
In fact,
and I
this
think that
public-
was what
the
everybody
public
said. Look,
participation-
we have no problem with it.
The public
but-
participation
yeah.
issue came up in court.
Yes.
You know, several Matatu circles and also
Right.
Senator Sakaja went to court about this ban. They wanted it to be suspended. And they said there was no public participation.
Because it is
done. People had
constitutional. It's
no
a
idea.
constitutional
It's a constitutional
requirement.
requirement.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was gazetted. This order was gazetted in 2017. And I don't understand why we started implementing it now. In fact, one of the reasons
There was
why
an
the court
election.
did not take up the ban was because of that.
Talking about public participation, I think we need to have one, whether we should take a break now or not. But as we do so, Jacob
As we talk about how
Abere-
Sonko is
Yes.
trying to drill himself out
Jacob
of a hole.
Abere Matlala
Wow.
is drilling some points into Sonko's head.
Wow, y'all are
If
full of
indeed it
puns
was a
today.
drill as Matatu CBD ban, let him put water points at Ngara, City Stadium, Fig Tree, Nairobi West, for Nairobians to be quenching and cooling wheels. Their heels, I thought he meant that, waiting for the next one.
But
for
as
the
you,
next
take,
one.
as you take the break, isn't there, though, that a political point to be made that from a political standpoint, there's something that Sonko did there that might just get him out of this?
Well, it's
To me, Joe, I think the main issue here is who is in charge? Nobody is in charge of this conversation. I think you started by saying trial and error, and this is truly it. The question that is also pertinent is the space of the national government in reshaping or sorting out the Nairobi issue. It was done by Tanzania in sorting out Dar es Salaam with Dodoma. Abuja, it was driven by the national or federal government. I think we've heard of an initiative currently, what is it called? The one with the president and the team that
Regeneration.
works.
Nairobi
Nairobi
Regeneration.
Regeneration.
The bomoa.
Yeah, can it be a bit more serious than just pulling down buildings in the riparian? They should have these conversations on what Nairobi should look like. Meantime, politicians, really, these food analogies, every time we talk about processes, this food comes in the way. I think in elections we talk of the cake. You know, everything is to be eaten. And today, we are breaking eggs. I don't think we are breaking eggs. Who is the egg? The Nairobian?
Maybe.
wow.
Well,